Anin, Mississauga Nation. This is Caleb Musgrave from Hiawatha First Nation. I'm a bushcrafter, I'm a woodsman, and I was asked to demonstrate how I peel birch bark off the trees in the summer. So there's a lot of ways we peel bark. There's a lot of methods throughout the year that we can peel bark. I actually prefer to peel my bark in my birch bark in the winter, so you can get winter bark that you can etch and do beautiful designs on. But if I'm peeling bark in the summer, the beautiful thing is I can do it standing. I don't have to cut the tree down, I don't have to kill the tree at all. First and foremost, we got to select the right tree. This is a good one for making baskets. Definitely not the right size for making a canoe, a Jimon, but it's definitely the right size for making baskets. In my back pocket here, I have a couple of sample cards. This one from a birch right next door. One from a birch about 100 yards away. And then one from Weenzik, from a yellow birch. And you can see that this is really, you know, brittle, weak stuff. I'm trying to get the camera to focus here. Probably won't. But you can see that this stuff breaks apart really easily. It doesn't really hold up. It's a little leathery, but it's very thin and weak. So not good bark. This one from about 100 yards away, the bark was decent, but it's brittle. Like, it looks nice until you actually examine it and look at it and start playing. So when you take these sample cards, you peel down near the bottom of the tree, you take a 2" by 2" square and just start bending it in different directions and see what happens. This one is from the birch next door. Doesn't really break until I get it to 90 degrees, which is about when most birch will break. So that's not bad. And the thickness is about 1/18 of an inch, or about 3 millimeters, give or take. If you want to know what I'm looking for in birch for baskets, it's about the thickness of 2 nickels, if you stack 2 nickels on each other. For a canoe, I won't even look at the bark until it's at least 3 nickels thick. I've peeled bark that was 3/16 of an inch thick to 1/4 inch thick, and those all were used for canoe building. For basket making, we can get away with bark about this thick. And I took it from a neighbor because we were examining the neighbor first, and we decided that the neighbor wasn't, it's nice and big and beautiful, but it's a little booky, the grain isn't exactly what we liked. This one looks really nice. So now we're going to start peeling. I have a knife on me, real sharp tip, and I have 3 other pieces of equipment. I have a peeling disc. This can be made out of a piece of birch bark on the fly, but this is just a vinyl cutting board that was cut into shape. I have clamps and 2 splints of cedar. Alright? And that's going to be used all together once I finish cutting the bark. So, where I choose to hit my bark with cutting is I try to avoid knots and I try to avoid scarring. I'm looking for the cleanest bark to cut through. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's better to have these big knots in the body of your basket than on the edge of your basket, because it's really difficult to sew through those without destroying the whole basket. So, don't mind the dog in the background. We take the knife, we find a clean section of bark, and we reach as high as we can, pushing in with our thumb and keeping steady pressure. I'm going to go as low as I can, and I'm even going to brace the knife and keep pushing down almost to the ground, not all the way. And I'm going to go back and examine that cut. This is really nice bark. This is really nice bark. For this territory, for this part of the territory, this is really nice bark. I just go up with my knife and begin the split. And now I take my peeling disc, put it in there and start rolling it. And now that I've got about a 2" peel, to keep the bark from splitting apart now, I get my splints. And I put one on the inside of the bark. Flip it around if I have to. There we go. And then one on the outside of the bark. Like that. I'm going to clamp them together. So clamp it there. Clamp it about here. Clamp it down here. And at the very bottom. And what this does is kind of like snowshoes. When we walk on snowshoes on snow, they spread our pressure out so that we don't sink down. These two clamp pieces of wood are going to spread my pressure out so I don't tear the bark. So now I can just pull very carefully, take my peeling disc, roll it underneath, roll all the way back up. And as I do that, I'm just pulling on these splints. Gotta make a few adjustments here. Make sure my clamps are on the split cedar still. And what this disc does is kind of act like a spatula between the frying pan and my eggs. Bark being the eggs. Just helping me lift it up. Especially around these knots. We don't want to try and pull through and muscle through that, it'll just tear. So I'm going to come around to the other side. I'm going to examine my bark. There's a scar here, there's a little bit of scar tissue over on this side. Whenever I feel, as I pull on this sheet, whenever I feel resistance, that's when I start rolling that disc again. It's kind of funny. This time of year, the bark has almost like a watermelon rind smell. Like it smells like the rind of watermelon. You know what I'm talking about. There we go. There's my sheet. It's been completely removed. There's one hole in the entire sheet. Compare that to your own times, and I was going fast. And that was one spot that I missed when I was pulling. Now, I take off the clamps. I take off my splints. I'm going to roll it inside out from the top down. And this is how I store it, this is how I carry it out of the bush. And then when I'm near the end, I can either just tuck it under my arm and carry it like that, or I can go and look for a basswood and peel some bark off the basswood. I can get a cedar or spruce root and tie it together, keep it all together. The beautiful thing about rolling it inside out and upside down like that is the bark can't curl on itself. I've seen a lot of people store their bark by clamping it and stacking it and clamping and stacking it to make like these flat boards. That does work. It takes up a whole lot more room than this does. I can roll another roll of bark around this, and another roll of bark around this, and eventually get to the size of a 55-gallon oil drum. And that's it. That could be 200-300 feet of bark in one stack. And they're going to be stored better this way. I don't have to worry about clamps, I don't have to worry about mildew, I don't have to worry about anything like that. I just store them in a dry, cool place, and they'll last indefinitely. Bark stored this way can last 30, 40, 50 years and still be serviceable for making canoes, baskets, sugaring trays, sugar cones, anything you can think of that you want to use for this bark. So that's all you got to do. That's all the process is. Miigwech for tuning in.